Escalating tensions in the global semiconductor market are zeroing in on the Netherlands' unprecedented move against the Chinese-owned chipmaker Nexperia. This saga, which can be dubbed the Netherlands in the Cold Chip War, has thrown Europe's critical supply chains into chaos, hitting the German automotive sector especially hard. This is no longer a localized corporate dispute. It is now a crucial front in the techno-economic conflict between the West and China. The Dutch government, traditionally a champion of free trade, executed an unprecedented intervention at the end of September, placing the semiconductor manufacturer Nexperia under the control of the Ministry of Economic Affairs for a period of 1 year. This is evoking sharp criticism and harsh reactions from China. And with that, welcome to this episode of On Your Left, the news brief that looks behind the headlines on economic developments and politics in and around Europe. My name is Felix Sassmannshausen. The Dutch move involved invoking a rarely used piece of legislation, the 1952 Goods Availability Act. But what powers did this Cold War-era law grant the government? The intervention allows the minister to block or reverse corporate decisions. Specifically, Nexperia is prohibited from transferring assets, dismissing existing executives, or making strategic decisions without explicit government approval. The regular production process, however, is allowed to continue. The Ministry of Economic Affairs stated the reason for this highly exceptional measure was to ensure production security in Europe. The ministry spokesperson told me they acted due to recent and acute signals of serious management shortcomings and actions within Nexperia. Concrete evidence suggested that the Chinese CEO Zhang Shuisheng was planning to relocate production facilities, financial resources, and intellectual property rights abroad in the short term. The severity of these actions meant the loss of crucial technological knowledge and production capacity from Dutch and European soil that would have likely happened within appreciable time, the ministry stated. Losing these capabilities, the government argued, would pose a risk to Dutch and European economic security and strategic autonomy. We know from court documents that the CEO's conduct was bordering on recklessness, as it's stated. For instance, he made apparently unnecessarily large multi-million order on behalf of Nexperia from WSS, a Chinese sister company in which he held an interest. The CEO was subsequently suspended and removed from his role by the Dutch judiciary. China's reaction was immediate and forceful, confirming that geopolitical temperature of this conflict is rising. The Chinese government imposed an export ban on Nexperia chips manufactured in its Chinese facilities. Wingtech, the Chinese parent company, acquired Nexperia in 2019 and demanded that the Dutch government return control and ownership rights, stating that only then could the Netherlands begin to restore its reputation, reduce international tensions, and ensure its own European economic security. The China's Semiconductor Industry Association denounced the action, criticizing the Netherlands' abuse of the concept of national security and calling the intervention discriminatory against Chinese companies. The chips Nexperia makes, relatively simple components used in phones, solar panels, and the automotive industry, are essential despite their simplicity. The problem is logistical. While the chips are designed in Nijmegen and wafers are made in Europe, for example in Hamburg, final assembly and cutting are largely carried out in China. An estimated 50 billion chips are produced in China each year. The export ban immediately threatened production lines across Europe. German automakers, particularly Volkswagen and BMW, moved into crisis mode. For context, up to 600 Nexperia chips are required for a single vehicle. When asked about potential disruption, Volkswagen confirmed that Nexperia is not a direct supplier, but its components are used in vehicle components supplied by its direct vendors. Volkswagen acknowledged that while vehicle production at German sites was secured for the immediate future, they could not fundamentally rule out short term effects on the production network due to the dynamic situation. Volkswagen stated it is actively examining alternative procurement options to minimize impact. This immediate supply shock lands squarely on the European automotive sector at an already vulnerable moment. This acute disruption occurs amid broader material shortfalls impacting European manufacturing. A survey by the German Economic Research Institute (IFO) noted that the shortage of materials among manufacturers of electronic and optical products increased significantly in October, with 10.4% of companies reporting bottlenecks, up from 7% in July. These bottlenecks are linked to control mechanisms and trade restrictions, particularly those concerning rare earths, adding to the turbulent times high-tech business generally faced due to escalating geopolitical tensions with China. The Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs, led by Minister Vincent Karremans, found itself immediately entangled in diplomatic sparring. The question is, where do negotiations stand, and what is the official Dutch stance on American influence? Minister Karremans and his Chinese counterpart, Minister of Commerce Wang Wentao, spoke by phone. Karremans stated that they discussed further steps toward a constructive solution that would be in the interest of Nexperia, the European economy, and the Chinese economy. However, the Chinese side, speaking to press agency Caiyan Press, stated that the Netherlands must urgently resolve the matter and adhere to market principles. As trade talks between China and the United States seem to lead to some common ground at the moment, the question of foreign influence, specifically from the United States, arises. China alleged that the Netherlands acted under US pressure. But Minister Karremans was forceful in his denial. He assured that the decision to intervene was a national measure taken based on domestic corporate deficiencies. In fact, Karremans previously said, "I have not spoken about it with a single American since I became Minister of Economic Affairs." Yet, the idea of US pressure has been a constant in the discourse. Media reports show that the US has long called for restrictions on chip exports to China. Critically, Nexperia's parent, Wingtech, was added to a US export control list at the end of 2024, directly affecting Nexperia. Furthermore, while the ministry spokesperson confirmed to me that talks with the US regarding broader safety concerns around Nexperia had taken place, they emphasized these occurred long before the move. The ministry maintains there was no outside pressure or coordination with other countries. For now, the ministry spokesperson declined to comment on the current status of negotiations to lift the Chinese export bans. And there's the question of European involvement. A spokesperson for the European Commission stated that the EU executive was in close contact with The Hague regarding the matter. He affirmed that the Dutch government's action aligned with the EU's economic security strategy, emphasizing the priority of protecting technological security. The EU Commission is now collaborating with Dutch authorities on next steps to ensure the security of crucial technological capabilities across the continent. This intervention aligns well with broader European initiatives, as the EU has previously stated plans to invest 43 billion euros in its chip industry to bolster domestic manufacturing, and the Dutch government had already initiated an EU member state coalition to promote more sovereign European chip ecosystem through discussions on the European Chips Act 2.0. And the Dutch ministry stated that it is in dialogue with European colleagues. However, an inquiry into the matter at the EU Commission remained unanswered, as well as the question whether the 1952 Dutch law is actually even in line with EU regulation. So, we have a crisis that started with a rare legal intervention over corporate governance, immediately triggering geopolitical retaliation and now threatening the supply chains of major European industries like Volkswagen. This episode underscores Europe's vulnerability in the global chip ecosystem and how governments are increasingly taking rare measures to protect their industries. The Netherlands already central due to companies like ASML, which had its advanced chip machine deliveries banned to China at the request of former US President Biden, is now grappling with the painful consequences of trying to enforce economic security. The Nexperia case exposes the stark reality that intervention against Chinese owned assets are unlikely to be cost free and risk creating supply shortages, even as the government aims to prevent them. So, it seems like a challenging time for policymakers and manufacturers alike in a situation where the economic future is more than uncertain. That's all for today. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any thoughts on the episode, feel free to share them in the comments or send me a message. To stay up to date, subscribe to my newsletter published every Tuesday. My name is Felix Hassmannshausen. Until next week.